Welcome back to another episode of The Pipeline. Really pumped for this episode. We have Rushi on as our special guest, co-founder of Movement Labs. And we're also joined again by another guest co-host, Kevin G., leading developer relations at Monad. Thanks for coming on, guys.
Appreciate the time, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
100%. Certainly, we've had Kevin before, and people are familiar with his role at Monad, and certainly Movement's been in the news quite a bit over the past couple years. For anyone who's not familiar, though, Rushi, can you give a high-level intro of yourself, your background, and what you're working on at Movement?
I'm Rushi, co-founder of Movement Labs, chief nerd, shitposter, DGen on the team. Backgrounds in engineering, history, and database security, database systems, smart contract engineering. Have always been interested in how can we take modern day tech stacks and blockchains to the next level. Me, like many other folks, didn't like the old generic EVM. It was slow, clunky, broken, took forever to work with. Thankfully now, especially this year, we're seeing a lot of alternatives, and that kind of inspired the vision for Movement, right? Bringing this novel move concept, which was originally developed by Facebook, to the DM days, with over $1 billion in research, and bringing it to networks like Ethereum, where it can live with liquidity and user bases. So Movement is building the first network of move-based blockchains. We're launching with M2, the first move rollup on Ethereum, powered by Sonoma Consensus, and
Awesome. That's super exciting to hear. And I think there's like a ton of common ground here in terms of just a focus on let's make blockchains more performant and let's celebrate some of the use cases. What are, to each of you, some of the key value propositions of a high performance blockchain?
I can go first. I think the highest performance blockchains can handle the billion users they're all trying to optimize for, right? I think the funniest thing is when you see like normal EVM folks or normal people who don't like to use any new technology say, we're trying to onboard the next million users, we're trying to onboard all those users. And then once we hit like 50,000 users, the gas fees go through the roof. And it's like becomes literally unusable. And then next week gets hacked for billions of dollars. And you're sitting there like, okay, if I can't do 50,000 users, how can I do 1 million users? How can I do anything that I claim to do? So I think everyone's on the same page, especially in every vertical, is that a high performant next generation blockchain can actually handle the demand that we're all in the room for. We all believe in this thesis where everyone is on chain, and that simply can't happen with the prehistoric EVM. Fortunately, there's better teams like Monad and Movement coming to solve that.
Yeah, so I'm gonna dodge the question a little bit because I think Rishi pretty much covered it. I think that was a great answer. I just wanted to understand more this spaghetti monster that is this thing you're building, so we can reason about where everything is, right? So maybe if you could just give us a rundown of the architecture a little bit. I know you mentioned Celestia for DA, and you also mentioned you're a layer 2. So if maybe you could just describe how these pieces fit together, that would be kind of cool.
So for execution environment, we have the Move Virtual Machine, pretty straightforward. That's a DM VM built by the DM project and taken by Aptos and Sui. It supports Aptos, Move, Sui Move, as well as it's actually fully VM compatible. I'll get more to that later with the transpiler that we built. So that's execution environment. Settlements on Ethereum, so it's a layer 2. We leverage Ethereum security and liquidity with that. And the last piece of the puzzle is DA, because in traditional rollups like arbitral optimism, sure, you can bring next generation VMs to Ethereum, but you still have the biggest bottleneck, which is data availability. That's why we partnered with Celestia to bring the rollup to Ethereum on Celestia DA, so we don't have those high gas fees that we see on Ethereum. So it's almost like the performance we're seeing with layer 1s with extremely low gas fees, but you inherit the security and decentralization of Ethereum mainnet. We also do have a decentralized sequencer set that's coming out later that helps address the centralization points that we see with modern day rollups.
And you're using Avalanche for the decentralized sequencer, if I understand this correctly?
So we're using Sonoma Consensus, which is from the Avalanche ecosystem. What's really beautiful about that, it's really low hardware requirements. It's actually one of the most decentralized consensus mechanisms on the market, or arguably the best consensus mechanism on the market with instant finality. decentralization to the point where anyone can run a validator from their home. And it's also really cool because you have financial incentives baked in. So traditional decentralized sequencers, and I'm getting into my rant, are very unprofitable in the sense like how you get Arbitrum based these big dogs to ever use a decentralized sequencer, literally take away their one business model into the new like decentralized sequencer set. It's very difficult, and the answer is always like never, right? What's really interesting about our decentralized sequencer set is that you actually use our native token to secure the network. So if you want to participate in sequencing the network, you have to stake Move, which A, gives value accrual back to the token, and B, creates an ecosystem of valor sets that's actually incentivized to keep the network uptime going. So that's kind of how we're handling the centralization points we see with modern day rollups.
So you're a weird mashup of Move, Avalanche, Ethereum, and Celestia.
Yeah, I like to call ourselves an L1.5 as a joke. I started to think it was not really a joke because if you're having a decentralized sequencer set, you're on Ethereum, it's kind of like a mix of an L1, L2, but for the sake of not getting into that, let's just call it L2.
Awesome. That's interesting.
Yeah, I think that was a pretty great high level overview in terms of like where the approach is for movement specifically. But I want to bring it back to some of the issues that are top of mind in crypto today and the different approaches that are at hand to solve them. Would love to hear from Rushi first and then Kevin. What are the most pressing issues in your opinion facing crypto currently?
I can go first. I think the biggest issue in crypto is, besides use cases and actually getting people on chain, is that today's infrastructure, especially execution layer, sucks. Like obviously Solana was doing well and still is doing really well, but it's very difficult to get builders writing in Rust. I think that's something that we figured out the hard way. Is like we started doing this Move VM stuff, but there's only a handful of Move developers, especially in a bear market. There's a financial disincentive to not use Solidity because all the volume, TVL, etc. If you're a developer, you want to be a max Solidity god instead of a Rust god because the TVL's in EVM. So I think that's why it's really interesting, the approaches that both Movement and Monad are going at is saying, look, you're a Solidity developer, you're Aave, Uniswap, keep your Solidity code. You can bring it to a next generation network, and you don't need to hire a new engineering team. You don't need to like learn a new programming language that's rather untested. It just works out of the box.
Awesome. Can you repeat the question again, Danny? What was the biggest problem facing blockchains right now?
Yeah, and specifically involved with like what each of you guys are working on. So like what is Movement tackling, what is Monad tackling, and I'm sure there's quite a bit of overlap there.
Yeah, I think there is like a lot of overlap there. I think, like at the core of the problem, it's just like how do we onboard more people realistically, and I think Rushi got to this with his last answer, but it's like, what is it actually going to take to like make a lot of these pie in the sky ideas reality, right? And like at least today, like a lot of those answers boil down to scale. And so like just actually bringing like raw, real scale to a blockchain system is, I think, pretty much the biggest problem, right? And then there's all sorts of problems around like security and, like actual usability on the programming side of things that we can maybe get into in more detail going forward.
Yeah, and regarding scale, like from a non-technical perspective, it often seems like the scaling conversation is top of mind for everyone, but there may not be enough users on a lot of these applications to be really like pushing the limits of scaling right now. Would you say that's correct, or if not, like which products really are first or front running that lead to actually scaling adoption?
I think right now infrastructure is still not, ready for the apps. Like, for example, when GMX is kind of crushing in high volumes, Arbitrum on gas shoots up to the point where it's like, I don't even want to use this thing anymore. So even today, like these EVM rollups like Arbitrum are kind of broken and inconsistent gas fees. If I'm going on Arbitrum today and I'm used to gas being $1, and tomorrow it's like $23, my trading strategy just got wrecked, right? Unless I'm a big whale where I'm deploying $5 million a day, and the gas is negligible. For the average user, if I'm working with $100 or $200 a day, that huge jump in gas is ridiculous. That's why parallelized runtimes, localized fee markets are very important for these developers, so that the same user experience is guaranteed every day. And then we look into like these broader use cases, right? We talk about SocialFi, we talk about payments. It's definitely not ready right now. I'd say like Solana, Monad, these guys are really pushing the boundaries and actually being able to handle the transactions we need for payments and gaming. Obviously, the use cases haven't been there yet to test that. But I think Solana has been showing good promise so far. Obviously, the Pith airdrop just came out, and Solana handled that like a champ, even though there's a lot of users and activity on chain. But yeah, we're still waiting for the next killer app to kind of push the boundaries. I'd say.
Yeah, I think like the reality of the world today, and it's kind of sad to say, but it's probably true. If we had a single app with the amount of users of like a Web 2 successful app like Instagram or Facebook, every blockchain today would break immediately, yep. Solana included. Like they would all just fall over. And so like it's really like we're really reaching this point where we have line of sight on a world where that's not true, but like yep. we're just not there yet. And so it's kind of an exciting time to be in the space, you know, and looking at these different system designs as they're coming up. I know one of the things that was like really exciting to me, like when I moved into blockchains, is like, you know, there's a lot of industries where like there's a lot of unsolved problems, but they're like just open research and you don't really like have line of sight on a solution. Blockchains are unique in the sense that like you kind of have all the pieces. It's just like no one's put them together yet. And like we're all trying to like solve this puzzle as quickly as possible. Yep. So it's actually like, it's really excited to watch, you know, like I think this conversation, if we would have had it even like a year ago, like something like a movement would just blow people's minds away, right? Like using all these different pieces, like putting them together like that, right? And now it's like a standard part of the conversation. So I think it's pretty exciting to just see like different architectures being tried and like kind of have line of sight on scale at this point to where it's like, we all know, like we're all looking at each other's designs and are like, in 5 years, this will be as good as mine, you know? And it's like, who gets there first? Which one's the most successful? There's like so many other like soft things that go around it, but it's cool to be in a space where you can talk to like next gen blockchains and it's getting like less tribal. It's more about just like, oh, we all have these like novel systems designs and like, let's see, you know?
So much. Yeah. People always ask me like, why move? Like, what gets you so excited? And my first response is, look, Facebook wanted to come to crypto, wanted to use Web3, wanted to use blockchain. They could have used Solidity. They could have used Ethereum. They could have used normal EVM. But what do? They're like, this is literally trash. I'm going to put $1 billion of my own capital and completely rewrite the language, completely rewrite everything. It's actually, Monad's actually technically based off the original DM, BFT principles and protocols. So in this world, we're all trying to get the next Facebook. The Facebook literally came, said this is horrible, and did it themselves, is kind of a testament to where we are in the infrastructure landscape.
I think there's like a common misconception amongst non-technical folks and people that really aren't plugged into the research or developer communities that like blockchains are ready to go, they're ready to scale, they're ready to handle any app that someone can build on them. And that's not the case, obviously, right? So like even looking at advancements over the past 2 years, I think there's a lot of development that's gone unnoticed in the bear market in a variety of ecosystems, really every ecosystem where there's active developers. And one thing that's really inspiring to me about both Monad and Movement is it seems to be from a business and protocol perspective, much more friendly to collaboration as opposed to this rigid competition that we've seen in past cycles amongst blockchains fighting through these infant stages just to come to fruition and get a few users. So I would assume you would both agree with me that the blockchain and crypto ecosystem needs more collaboration overall. Would love to hear you each unpack that and see your take on where you think this is going in terms of a collaborative mindset of this niche crypto ecosystem we have today.
I like to say the execution layer is the most friendliest layer. I think we've seen all those like Twitter wars of like all L1s competing and yelling at each other, and then all like the wars of different DA layers and all the wars of different like settlement layers. Like, is Ethereum the best and all be all? What does it mean to be aligned? What does it even mean anymore? I think what's really interesting is like all the different VMs, whether it's Monad VM or EVM, Move VM, Solana VM. There's not really much. There's no one's going on Twitter and be like, the Solana VM is better than the Move VM. Solana VM sucks. Like, I think everyone agrees that like, these next gen VMs are a really interesting piece of technology. There's a lot of research that went into it, and they were designed for a specific use case in mind. It's not just like some random research some guy did in his basement and now shilling on Twitter to pump his bags. It's genuine, like streamlined research that went into saying how can we unlock new use cases for customers. So when we're actually collaborating, like, why are we even on this podcast, right? It's like, yes, technically they're different VMs, technically they're competitive environments, but in reality we're trying to like obtain the same end game where users can actually be on the next generation blockchain, not be limited by the bottlenecks they see in the EVM. And I think everyone just hates the old EVM. That's like the common consensus no matter where you go. The old EVM needs to burn, taken behind the barn, and shot. Like, there's no other way for it to live. Whereas like other debacles, you have like, at least there's an argument.
Yeah, I think like we'll see if this holds into the bull market. but I think like everyone's really tired of fighting with each other, right?
Yes.
And there's like a reality where it's just like, hey guys, can we just like move the space forward, right? Like, it helps no one for like Ethereum and Solana to be at each other's throats like for the last year and a half, right? It wasn't good for Solana. I was there. I was Corange. Like, it wasn't good for Ethereum. Like, I'm over here now, you know, like it's just like net not good for the space. So like, why don't we make another approach where like we're just friendly and curious about each other's things and we're learning from one another. We're collaborating. You know, you can make a pretty good argument that like a lot of the improvements to Solana came from it respecting Ethereum. And like when Ethereum called it out on decentralization, you know, they were like, okay, like let's address these things, right? I think that is now kind of being like seen in like the newer VMs and the newer execution chains are now like a little bit contributing back to Ethereum in the sense that like, oh, we would like to see these other features, and Ethereum's now going, you know what, maybe there's a good point there. So I think like the whole like industry just got to a point where it's like, hey guys, like we can make like a lot more progress if we actually just like work together. And so like,
took forever.
At like the end of the day, yeah, maybe someone's going to win. Maybe it's a parallel distribution. But like, if we don't onboard users because we're fighting with each other the whole time, like no one wins, you know?
100%.
So hopefully this like keeps being a thing until the next, like through the next bull. I'm sure we're all going to be at each other's throats at some point, but I'm enjoying it in the bear right now, or the beginning of the bull.
100%.
When that movement war is coming.
Yeah.
Oh, no way. No way. Hopefully, or Kevin, I think you put this like really well, and I don't want to put words in your mouth or paraphrase you and get myself in trouble. But last time you were on the podcast with Keone, you were talking about like, let's just focus on specific problems and build an environment and then leave the choice up to developers. And maybe some blockchain ecosystems are going to be better for one app or one team over another. But like, let's give it our best shot to solve these problems and see where this can go. And I think that's like, to me, that's really powerful. That resonates with me because the general perception of crypto, if you go out on the street and ask someone about Bitcoin, like I saw a video yesterday, someone was like, would you rather have one Bitcoin or $100 in cash? And they were picking $100 in cash. So the general perception of crypto is that we're just this niche scam and basically just like selling monkey pictures online. And we need to make more headway, I think, rather than fighting internally about like which solution might win over another. And that kind of leads me into the state of the industry as a whole. Over the last 2 years, I think there's been a lot of headway, both on the engineering or the blockchain and infrastructure side, as well as the product side of things. And some of that headway has certainly gone unnoticed with the macro headlines just saying crypto is bad. So how do you perceive crypto as being different now as opposed to even the height of the last bull market in 21?
I think the infrastructure is finally ready. I think we're like all like the missing puzzles, all like the gas fees, all the ZK proofs, all like the optimistic, whatever you want to call it. It's done. Like we've put so much money into infrastructure, and this is coming from infrastructure builders and someone who's like raised fundraising around. When you talk to any speculators, talk to venture funds, talk to people trying to get into the industry, I think we've solved every point of the issue. We've solved, like, people said DA was too expensive. Okay, Celestia came out. People said the EVM sucks. Okay, we completely rebuilt the EVM. We brought in different VMs. Great. Now what? So I think what's different about this cycle is now, A, you'll have retail coming in with ETFs and hopefully better public sentiment with more regulations coming in. But B, on the developer side, there's less need for infrastructure building because pretty much everything's checked off. I think Haseeb brought this up a few months back at a Stanford blockchain conference. We reached a point where most like infrastructure is 99% there. Sure, you can get into 1% nuance and throw in some intense stuff to make it cooler. But the infrastructure is there, and now we're ready to unlock actual app cases, which wasn't the case back then. Ethereum was too expensive a few years back. Bitcoin was unprogrammable a few years back, and now we're ready for the actual apps.
Yeah, I would push back a little bit. I think we're like a line of sight, so that's good.
Yep.
I think we still got like a couple of years, like we said earlier, like if a Facebook level of users came on chain, like every chain would break, right? But it's still at the point where like we have line of sight on the solution, which is like a lot to be said versus previous cycles. So yeah, I mean, honestly, that's a little bit of a dangerous place to be because if we have like a huge bull, like a lot of people might get disillusioned and we might have a really long bear. So like it's, it's a little bit of an awkward place to be, but it is exciting, like being in the industry, being here every day and realizing like there may only be one more of those, like guaranteed by next cycle, like things will be ready, like 100%. And so I think that's pretty exciting.
The line of sight point makes sense because obviously like our chains aren't live yet and there's a lot of still stuff in production. But the ideas for like infrastructure set, if that makes sense. The line of sight.
Yeah, like if you go to a VC and tell this stuff, they're not gonna like squint at you and be like, "Are you sure?" At this point, it's like, "Oh no." There's like an actual solution with real research behind it. Yeah. No, that's pretty good. I guess I have a question for you, Rushi, to understand. Like, you guys are Move VM, but you have an EVM compatibility. Maybe you could get into that and how that works and what that looks like.
Yeah, so I think the biggest issue that when we were doing BD, and I'm sure you guys came across it at some point, was next generation VMs are cool, but how to get adoption in the short term. We believe in the next 4 to 5 years, the Move language is going to win in terms of security, performance, Apple Suite, that's their thesis and not, and Solana as well, having alternative programming languages win. But in the short term, adoption is very difficult, especially in a bear market. So to counteract that, we're like, okay, how do we build backwards compatibility for our next generation technology? When you go from PS4 to PS5, the PS4 games still work on the PS5. That's not the case for in the past next generation blockchains. So that's why we built Fractal, essentially a transpiler that allows any Solidity code, 145 Solidity opcodes, to be mapped to the Move opcodes and then launch on the Move VM itself. So it's very similar to Solang on Solana, except a little bit more battle tested and focus more on security side. Because a huge bottleneck that we saw and kind of how we kind of differentiate with Move VM is formal verification. Every year, $4 billion lost. We just saw the Kyber attack where the guy basically held it hostage and still is, if I'm not mistaken. If we are to have
director.
The Kyber director. Imagine your 4-year-old mom coming to space, or like your sister coming to space. She deploys 5K, and the next day she sees like some 50-year-old guy in his basement is holding a hostage. Like, that's not good for anyone in the industry. So our thesis is, if you're going to have modern day, if you're going to have Facebook, if you're going to have Bank of America, if you're going to have Citibank on chain, you can't have a Kyber director kind of controlling it.
I love his hack message to everyone.
That's just hilarious.
The captain
like,
now.
It's hilarious. It's so bad that we've gotten so traumatized by these hacker attacks. We're like, oh, it happened. Oh, this is hilarious. And then we're going to meme out of it. When in reality, it's horrific. It's horrible, guys. This is horrible for the
That's
industry.
true. That's very true. Actually,
But at least it's funny.
I'm laughing while I'm crying.
For me, as like a non-technical user, like getting into crypto, bridging capital over, and like obviously small amounts, but like still there's such a huge risk there, and there's so much that you have to, as a user, execute correctly. And I just wanted to highlight that point, that I think it's so key that we get beyond this space, as funny as it is to see these messages dropping directly on chain from hackers, and just having this become just such a common theme in our culture. Like, I'm looking forward to evolving beyond that for sure.
Yeah, I guess I had a question about like the transpiler. Like, I know like a lot of the benefits of the move language come from like the typed bytecode, right? So you can do like checks at execution time. When you do a transpiler from Solidity, do you get any of those same benefits? Like, how does that work? Like, are you actually like typing, like transpiling to typed bytecode, or like what?
Yep. So a lot of the proving mechanisms and the security benefits, if not most of it, happens at the VM level itself. So you have the provers built into the VM. So the underlying VM is still the generic DM VM. So we inherit all the formal verification methods. You can think of it like a library on top at the SDK level that does the actual translation. So in practice, it's always better to just write the move code. It's more secure. But if you are using Solidity Transpiler, we essentially take the Solidity script and map it to statistically typed move opcodes that have security baked in. It doesn't have the exact security that like a move style would, like not 100%, but it's like pretty damn good.
So like, I know with like what's the Solana thing that lets you write Solidity? Soling, yeah. Like I know with Soling, like as much as you can write Solidity, like you still have to understand how Solana works, right? So it's not like it removes the need for access lists. I'm wondering, like, is that what the transpilers like on Movement? Like you still have the like underlying system constraints of the blockchain itself. I don't know the full architecture, right?
Soling is like kind of mid. I'm sorry if you like wrote it.
It's just what it is, because like it's not full Solidity. Yeah,
it's not really fully Solidity. It's not fully like really EVM like adjacent. For us, we really imitated, like honestly took some inspiration from you guys, where we wanted to feel like EVM, whether it's from like a parallelization point, works out of the box, Remix IDE, Infura compatible. So it feels, works, and looks like an EVM, except you just use the move VM underneath the hood. Whereas Soling is more like, it's a Solana VM, but it kind of is good for Solidity developers if you kind of want to use it, which makes it like a headache.
Nice. Awesome. Yeah, thanks for bearing with me. I was just interested.
No worries. I guess I can ask some questions to the Monad community as well. Obviously, you guys are layer one. Obviously, you guys are like competing with Solana. It's interesting to see, like, I see a lot of like, obviously, Keone speaking at ETH India. How do you guys think about this Ethereum aligned debate, right? Like, technically, you guys are the Ethereum killer, and I would argue that you're like Ethereum on crack. How do you align with Ethereum, and what does that mean?
I think like for us, it's more about just like having an actual viable solution, right? From like first engineering principles. And so like when you like take that problem from like a base, like just first principles thinking, and you really want to make the EVM fast, like if you want to stick with like, because we are using the EVM, like the actual EVM. Yeah, we're doing everything around it to make it faster, but in the sense where like the transpiler, you know, you're like swapping out the EVM and then compiling down. We're like doing everything that we need to make the EVM fast, which inherently from like a first principles engineering design means we have to change the database, we have to change consensus, we have to change all these things. And the only way you can get this as like a viable full package is being an L1. And so like the reason, like I personally, like coming from Solana Core, don't think we're very competitive with Solana in the sense that like if you're an SVM developer, you're going to go to Solana, right?
Yep.
Like if you're an EVM developer, then come to us, right? At the end of the day, it's more about like what you're used to, right? And I have a lot of friends over there, and the EVM ecosystem is huge, and like a lot of them are just like, well, we should probably have an EVM fork of our code base just because like there's a lot of chains we could deploy on if we could, right? And so it's less competitive and more of like market expansion as we're looking at it. And then from like the Ethereum community perspective, like we would actually be quite happy like for someone to take our execution layer. Like we want to contribute back, we want to make EIPs back to the base layer, but at the same time we don't want the social constraints of Ethereum mainnet to like hold us from actually having a full solutions and a first principle solutions. So it's this delicate balance where like we do want to contribute back to Ethereum, but we also don't want like the social layer of Ethereum as robust and amazing as it is, like to slow down the engineering process to the point where like we can't put a full solution on the table that like really addresses the scale. And like we were talking about earlier, like especially in a world where like this is line of sight, like it just makes sense. Like we can do it from first principles. We can do it. And then we also benefit from like all the research of the EVM, right? I would say that's one like kind of understated benefit of staying fully EVM bytecode compatible is like in the context of ZK, in the context of rollups, in the context of all this other research that Ethereum decided to go down, they're all kind of centered around like the assumption that the VM is the EVM. And so there's like a lot of benefits for us longer term on the things that we want to do as far as like being collaborative with Ethereum, as far as contributing back EIPs, being able to take prior research and apply them to our design and stuff like that. I would say that's really, I had a little Twitter conversation back and forth. There was a tweet about like, I think it was someone posed a question and maybe Anatoly responded to it about will anyone actually use like a new blockchain, even if it's the same, right? And people were kind of going back and forth, and I got into a back and forth with one of the guys, and at the end of it, like of our conversation, it was like, oh, well, I don't know if I would use that. Oh, I would for these cases. I wouldn't for these cases. Is like we kind of got to this conclusion where it was like, oh, okay, well then like Monad is just better for different things. And I was like, yes. That's the point, is to grow the pie, not fight over the pieces, right? And so, like, I think we're really just, like, trying to take that approach. Just like, like, we want to contribute back. We want you to contribute back. But at the end of the day, we want to enable more use cases on an EVM. And, like, that should net grow the pie, like, generally. And then leave it to developers to decide where they want to go. We personally believe we're going to have enough unique value props that they'll choose us. But it's right. It's the world that we live in. There's a lot of solutions and there's a lot of great people working towards scalable technologies. And at the end of the day, like, let's just move the space forward.
I think another question has, first of all, great response, makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Is how do you guys think about like security and other flaws of the EVM? Obviously, penalization, local fee markets, and addressing those issues of EVM is one side of the battle, but there's also like the $4 billion lost to smart contract hacks. For us, we approach that to the transpiler, getting access to provers and formal verification, 90% cut in hacker attacks. Are you guys looking to do something similar?
Yeah, so that's actually a great question. There's two main things. Like one, like just reducing the cost to develop means that like developers can be more aware, right? They can just put in a lot more checks. They can check a lot more things. They can be a lot more safer, and they don't have to worry about optimizing gas to the point where they're like compromising security for it, right? Step one, that's great. It's a limited amount of security, right? Because the developer has to think about it. There might be flaws in what the developer thinks about. There's the other thing is that in being an L1, we can add special instructions and stuff. And this is like more longer term stuff, but us being an L1 gives us the ability to do that, is that we can add like special instructions to the VM that you could literally just mark your contract as a non-reentrant, right? And so as a developer, you could just say like, no, when the VM's executing it, there's you cannot dispatch another call into this again. So like, that's another benefit of just kind of like being an L1 versus an L2 or any of these other things, is like we can add like a lot of like low level improvements to the VM itself that addresses a lot of these security concerns. Today, I
Yep.
think they're a little bit longer term because we're just trying to get the base blockchain out. But essentially, like on the first step, like developers will just have the option to be much more aware. And going forward, I think we're going to start adding, or at least looking and researching features to add to the EVM for these exact reasons.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, like,
All good.
I think I was saying this earlier that the grow the pie analogy, like, or mindset really resonates with me personally. Like, having been only in crypto a couple years, seeing a lot of users in 2020, 21, and then 90+% of those users going away, and a lot of products not seeing market fit throughout this bear. So it seems like we're at this point where we're ready to scale, but we're not ready to scale to the point of a billion users like an Instagram or Facebook. So what products actually are ready to scale that are going to be most impactful in the next 2 years or so and really push crypto forward?
Yeah, Rishi, I'll let you take that first if you'd like to.
I think payments is set to be disrupted. Like if you want to send money from New York to Tokyo right now, it's like an arm and a leg. Go through three different providers. I don't even know how to do it, honestly. I've tried doing money back to family in India, and I can tell you, like, if I'm sending like $100, it's like $20 that's gone through fees. And it's really the point of stablecoins, right? That's a point of crypto, is to enable cross-border payments. And in previous like iterations, we've seen those attempts at like Web3 Venmos. The UX has never been there. It's always been, oh, you need to do like these wallets, you need to do these seed phrases. Good luck convincing your 14-year-old sister to do that, right? But now we have like account abstraction in. We just like Venmo's transaction signing. So again, infrastructure is coming to the point where like a lot of these bottlenecks that we saw in user experience, in addition to underlying infrastructure, having parallelized next-gen chains that can handle payments, the combination of better wallet experiences, better blockchains, I think are set to like completely disrupt payments. And the Western unions of the world should be pretty terrified.
That's actually what I was going to say specifically. I think payments is like ripe. We're at a point where we could support like a Visa network on chain. So I would say that's one use case that's very ripe. I would say like retail trading is pretty ripe for disruption. I don't know about like high frequency trading quite yet. We're probably still like one iteration of a cycle away from that. But I think we're like pretty much there with like on-chain order books and retail trading at slippages that actually make sense. And like make sense from like a market maker standpoint to where they can quote on the book and be profitable. And then I honestly think gaming, like you actually could, is probably at a point where you could build a pretty good game, right? As long as you just do like asset tracking and state tracking on chain and not like run the entire game engine on chain.
I have a question. What do you think of the state of Web3 gaming? Because gaming has been a word that people have thrown around like as the use case of crypto, right? And so far, no one's really been able to do it. And we're all waiting for like the one game to break in the doors. Where do you think are the biggest issues?
Yeah, I think creating a game is harder than creating an on-chain game.
Yep.
And so like just actually creating a good game is the bottleneck for that. I don't like when they do that first and then they're like, oh, okay, like now we can add asset tracking and stuff to it. I think that makes a lot of sense. Like Roblox with NFTs makes a lot of sense, right? But they made Roblox first, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of like, yeah, like I think the main bottleneck for gaming is like first create a fun game and then put like components of it on chain, right?
And then there's also the aspect along with it that like it's kind of a weird thing too, right? Like you have gamers trading CS:GO skins, you have the RuneScape gray market for gold that's been around for like 15 plus years. And those users are getting scammed left and right. They're like wire transferring to some random anon. It's much less secure than crypto, but still, I think a lot of damage was actually done in 2021 when you look at how crypto gaming or Web3 gaming was presented, and also what was going on with NFTs at the same time, with the normal or the average person's perception being like, this is some scam where these people are selling online monkey pictures for hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's crazy. I don't want gaming to look like that, when it's actually really a misunderstanding, because they want gaming to look like that. They love trading these skins all day long. So it's like a weird point that I think we're at, but also this time will be different because there's been so many teams building hard that raised during the last bull market, working on games on a few different chains. And I'm personally excited to see what happens with some beta tests and actual full releases of those games with both the crypto community and, you know, like general gamers.
Yeah, I think like us in crypto, right? We're kind of degens. We're kind of like, we like Ponzi games. And so like a lot of the things have been like targeted toward like, you know, people who like Ponzi games, right? And I think we're like finally at the point where like we need to move past that. Like if there's a Ponzi mechanic, like it's probably time to phase that out. Let's like move on to like sustainable economics. It's a great growth strategy, right? But like, and like a lot of crypto native people enjoy it because that is kind of the game, you know, like we're all here to like trade like a lot of the time or like do degen stuff, right? But the outside world looks at that and they think scammers, right? And so I'm just really excited to see like use cases that like take the social coordination aspect and like use it in other areas other than finance, right? You can like make a Ponzi game that's not about money, right? Maybe it's about like social reputation status or other things, right? And I think that gets really interesting, right? You can create some like unique experiences just based on like social coordination dynamics that don't have to do with financials.
Yeah, well, I mean, before we wrap up here, would certainly love to kind of hear from each of you what you're most excited about in crypto, what you're excited to be working on. Starting with Rushi, please.
Most excited about crypto, I would say tribalism is breaking down. We've seen like in the last like 2 weeks, I've seen like core Ethereum, like people who would never have shilled anything besides Ethereum L1 start talking about like, hey, there's other VMs, there's other DA layers, like giving head nods to other people in the space. We haven't seen that like really ever. We see like Ethereum and Solana people like coming together, right? So I think that like tribalism is finally breaking down. We can stop fighting with each other. For the 5 users we're all fighting above, and actually put together like useful mindshare, like Kevin was talking about before. So I think just general like having more cohesive community that works together from a community point of view, technology point of view. Yeah, like obviously like love next gen VMs. I think the EVM sucks. I've always hated it. I would literally run away from it. And I think it's finally great that we're putting it behind the past. And the last thing is on use cases, right? Like, even though friend tech was friend tech and like it's still it kind of dipped down in activity. It was a cool, unique use case that got people thinking, like, hey, maybe there's things outside of just an order book and an on-chain game. There's different ways to use this technology. And FedTech led to like I've seen like 8 pitch decks of different SocialFi apps. Those 8 pitch decks are probably not going anywhere, and that's fine. The fact that we're thinking about how can we use social like attention, social like going to different restaurants, going different places, and leveraging crypto, that's a great mind space to be in for actual use cases. And maybe if you have 100 of these pitch decks, maybe one of them will come through.
Yeah, I think the thing I'm most excited about obviously is Monad, right? But like
Gmonad.
Yeah, Gmonad. I'm gonna use this opportunity to shill EIP 3074, which like I was just in a conversation with an ETH core dev yesterday, and he's like not for it, and then like half the ETH core devs are for it. So I'm just gonna very like explicitly shill the fact that we need auth and auth call and have the core devs yell at me about it. So that's what I'm excited about.
Awesome. Well, I mean, certainly a lot to be excited about on all fronts with crypto, and really excited to have had you both on here. I think this was a fantastic conversation that the community is going to love diving into. And if you are in the community, if you're listening along, be sure to join the Movement Labs community as well as the Monad community and see what's going on. If you're a developer, check it out. Bring a product, hopefully to fruition. Would love to see it. Thanks, guys, for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for the time.